Catherine McClymonde, Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs and and Professor in Religious Studies. And the thought behind this session was that often people are looking for a mentoring relationship, and if you didn't get one sort of created for you in grad school or as soon as you join a department, it's really hard sometimes to go out and get one, and particularly if it hasn't been modeled for you. And so what I want to do is just spend a little bit of time going through some tips that I have on how to get a mentor, but then probably spend most of the time doing Q&A. And I think that will bring us back to some of the points that I say in the slides, but this would be at least a way to kick off our conversation. So just as a reminder, we're recording this session. I mentioned to Michael and to Tiffany that we will continue the recording throughout our conversation in the Q&A portion as well. But if there's a part of the conversation that you don't want to then be shared publicly, just let me know. And Sabrina will edit all of this before it ever goes forward. So if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen and just start walking you through some of this stuff. And then when this is over, I will email you this slideshow, so you don't have to worry about trying to copy everything down. All right, so let me get to my sharing my screen. Okay, so you should be able to see a slideshow that says want a mentor, here's how to get one. Can everybody see that? Okay, good. All right. So what is a mentor? And I wanted to start first by making sure that we all agree on what a mentor is, because there are actually a number of different professional relationships that you can have with people. And sometimes I have people coming to me asking for a mentor, and halfway through the conversation, I realized that's not really what they were asking for. They wanted something else. So for the purposes of this conversation, a mentor is a long-term relationship with a responsibility to provide the support, knowledge, and impetus that can facilitate professional success. That's one of the formal definitions. But one of the key things about this is that typically a mentor is a colleague. So in our cases, it would be another faculty person. And they are helping us to develop professionally in a confidential, supportive way. But they typically are drawing on their own experience to give you advice and guidance. This is, for example, not a professional coach whom you would hire to give you advice that doesn't come out of their professional training. A mentor instead draws on their personal experience. And that's important because we're going to touch base on how you connect with some of these people in a minute. Also, a mentor is not a sponsor. And a sponsor is someone who champions you individually by directly linking you with opportunities. Sometimes someone will wear multiple hats, but often a mentor is someone who is just talking with us about our own personal and professional development, but is not necessarily then naming us for opportunities in another context. So for example, if you want to be nominated for an award or for a position in the university or for a leadership position in your professional organization, and we can talk about how you make that happen as well. But if you're asking someone to be a mentor, you are not asking them to be a sponsor. That's a different request, and you want to be very clear in what you're asking for. And then finally, a mentor should be limited in scope, but flexible over time. What I mean by that is I've seen lots of times where someone gets excited about being mentored by another senior faculty member, and they meet for a while, and then at a certain point, it isn't really doing anything for them anymore, and they sort of feel stuck, and they feel like, well, I'm not really getting anything out of this relationship anymore, but I feel like I owe this person my time, and out of loyalty, I'm going to keep meeting with them, and it's not really productive anymore. So I will always recommend that when you start a mentoring relationship, you be specific about what you're looking for and bake into it a time to review. That also makes it easier for somebody to say yes because they don't feel like they're making a lifelong commitment to you. They can say to you, yeah, I'd love to mentor you for 2021. I'm going on leave next year, but we could certainly, do something until I go on leave or something like that. You can always renew, but it helps to keep it somewhat specific, right? The other thing you want to think about is, why would you want a mentor? And in some ways, I'm preaching to the choir here because you guys have signed up for this. But one of the things that I find is that I'll be in a post-tenure review meeting or a pre-tenure review meeting, or I'll call someone and say, you know, I've been thinking that so-and-so might be a great mentor for you. And immediately they think, oh my gosh, it's remedial. I've done something wrong and Catherine is trying to fix me. And that's not what mentoring is about. It is specifically to help you grow in your professional development. And ideally, you're getting matched with someone who can help you develop and identify your strengths, figure out how to either balance or address your weaknesses, maybe even help you articulate some of your goals, maybe stretch you a little bit in terms of your vision for your career path, all of those kinds of things, connect you with resources, all of those kinds of things. And the research that's been done has shown that people who have mentoring relationships have increased career satisfaction, they experience increased progress in their careers, enhance their productivity, actually spend more time on their scholarly activities, and they have better balance in their work-life situation. So these are positives that come that have nothing to do with remediation. And it's one of the things that we've really tried to turn around in the college around the pre-tenure moment and the post-tenure review movement, is not to think about this as remedial, but to think of it as being strategic in how you do your career growth. The other thing I'll say is that both the faculty members and their departments benefit from mentoring efforts. Your career growth can only help your department, and so it's worth fighting for that. And I am willing to be your partner if you ever feel like you need to go back to a department chair or department leadership to carve out time for mentoring. I'm happy to help you make that case if that ever becomes an issue. I also want to point out that Kavita Pundit is running a session later this week designed for the mentors, so that when you're in a mentoring relationship, and maybe you are already or you will be in the future, there are ways to do that that are also helpful for you and beneficial for you. The next point I want to make, and then I'll take a pause to see if you have any questions, is in the College of Arts and Sciences, we tend to embrace a mentoring network approach, as opposed to what I had in my PhD program, and I think is still pretty traditional in many disciplines, which is that your dissertation advisor is your mentor, and that person is the person who guides you into the early phases of your career, maybe even later, and it's a one-on-one situation. That would not have worked for me for a bunch of reasons. And so I am a big fan of building a mentoring network. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about as we're moving forward on how to secure a mentor. And I will send you this map. It's nothing carved in stone, but the idea is that you may need mentoring for different areas of your life, and not one person is going to be able to do all of that. So if we take a look at this map, most of us think of mentoring in terms of our research and our scholarship. Who is it who's going to guide me to do the publishing, the research, the scholarly advancement that I want to do? But when you start teaching, sometimes you also need people to help mentoring you with your teaching who have nothing to do with your research area. So for example, when I was teaching more than I'm doing now, I had a faculty member in another department, and we met for lunch at the end of every semester to talk about my teaching over that semester and to set one teaching goal for the coming semester. And that was the only thing we ever talked about. We didn't really talk about research. And he was very good at helping me to identify not so much teaching weaknesses, but like how to articulate what my area of growth was going to be. Like, what went wrong? What do I need to work on? Probably most helpful, he also was good at helping me just set a cap on what I was going to try to improve in the next semester. Because otherwise I would have been overwhelmed with all the things that I could improve in my teaching. And it helped me set a very specific goal. And you can see that could work in a bunch of different areas. Is there someone who can help you grow as a leader or make strategic service decisions? Is there someone who will help you navigate this institution? Particularly if you are newer to Georgia State, thinking, is there somebody who knows how Georgia State works, who can help you figure out how to navigate the institution that will save you some time and heartache. And sometimes that's around the unspoken politics as well as the actual policies and procedures, and that could be really useful. Apart from that, there may be people who are sponsors, and these are the people who will nominate you for a specific office or a specific honor or a specific opportunity. I want to volunteer right now to be this person for all of you. I have no problem with you coming to me cold and saying, I'm really interested in getting nominated for X. And if I'm not the right person to nominate you for X, I'll help you find that person and make the ask. Honestly, over time, this gets easier and easier, but the first couple times, if you don't quite feel comfortable doing it, I'm happy to do that on your behalf. And then finally, I call this the accountability for what really matters, and I got pushed back on that the last time we did this map with somebody. What I mean by that is sort of what are the foundational core values for me personally that have to drive and inform the rest of this. I need some personal mentors who are people helping me to grow just as a person and as someone who is continuing to pursue the things that are truly meaningful and important to me in the context of these other realms. And then as time goes on, you yourself will have your own mentees and you will have other ways of contributing publicly. So those are the ways that I think about the network developing. A few key things about this networking model. First of all, it puts the control for mentoring in your hands. If you think of it as not waiting for someone to volunteer to be your mentor or to just choose to mentor you, if you instead think, I'm going to build my own networking or mentoring network, you're in the driver's seat. And we'll talk about how to do that. Also, you're not dependent on one single person whose circumstances and ability to mentor you may change. And I will say for sure will change. At a certain point, that person may retire. Give you an example of that. When I came into religious studies, Tim Rennick was the department chair for religious studies. He was honestly a fabulous mentor for me. And then almost overnight, he got tapped to be working at the university level, focused on student success with the president. And I lost the one person in my unit who was really invested in mentoring me. And it really made me sit back and say, wait a minute, I've got all my eggs in one basket. This is the one person in the college who knows me well, who was putting me forward, making me think through opportunities. So think about making sure that you don't just have one person. Obviously, having a network allows you to have a career board of advisors. Some of you may have that already, but I like to have a group of people that I go to when I have to make an important decision and run questions by them and hear their perspectives. Sometimes I get different opinions. If I start hearing the same thing from this group of people repeatedly, I really pay attention to that because they know me well in different contexts. The other nice thing about a mentoring network is that you can build it over time. It evolves with you. It's not something that you have to do overnight. And you can think again about the areas where you need that growth to occur, and you can tap additional people to help you. And then finally, building a mentoring network, because it's intentional, requires you to determine what you're looking for in mentorship, for what purposes. And what I mean by that is I think for a lot of us, we know generically that having a mentor is important. But if somebody pushed back and said, well, why? Could you actually articulate what you think you're going to get out of a mentor? Because all of us have some assumptions in our head about how life is going to somehow be better if I have a mentor in certain areas. But have we ever articulated that to somebody else and thought about what we think it's going to help us accomplish? So my idea in moving forward is that as we build your network, your mentoring network, we want to think through what you're looking for, what your strategy is going to be to build that whole network, but also work on ourselves being able to articulate, this is my goal, short term and long term. So let me stop sharing my screen just for a second. And before I go on to the actual steps, are there any questions around anything I've said so far? Or things it brings to mind? You're good? Okay. Tiffany, you look like you're thinking. I don't want to force a comment, but
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of trying to create a mentoring network. I guess my question, and hopefully you may already be um, kind of going to talk about this in a little bit, but like, like, I understand how you could do that maybe at the department level, but in terms of, I mean, this is my first year at GSU, my second semester, and I really don't know very many people, so I don't even know where to go to
Mhm.
find, a I don't know, a people to find people who might be really good teachers who could help me with instruction, or, people who would be able to help with being strategic about, what things that you accept and kind of setting some really long-term goals. Like, I think at the department level, that's pretty covered, and I'm very fortunate with that, but I'm just not quite sure, like, how to build that network beyond people who have been gracious enough to try to help me in this first year.
That's a really good question. And we are going to go there in just a minute. Before I go there, though, any responses, Hakeem or Andre or Michael, to what Tiffany just said? Are there ideas that come to your mind?
I remember a couple of years ago we have a something called research date or some sort of event that interdisciplinary kind of event that get to know each others and their research. So it's like kind of expanding your network to other departments or other college who are in the different field, but doing something similar or something that collaborate with. So that kind of event was very helpful to get to know people outside of your house. So that thing just came up my mind that as one of the helpful events.
Yeah, we had I
Hmm.
think it was research cafes.
Yoga
Yeah.
cafe or yeah.
Yeah, but same idea. Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think obviously time is an incredibly precious commodity, but there are opportunities to meet people, even virtually. In some ways, I've found it easier to meet some people more easily virtually than I have in person. Um, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think there are some strategies. So, yeah. Anybody else have questions before I go on? Because now we'll head into the how-to steps. Yep. Okay, so I'm seeing someone else joined us, and I don't know who the KC initials are. I'm sorry, but welcome. So we are going to shift back to sharing my screen, and I will go back to where I stopped before and pick up now with the how-to strategies. And I basically got 6 sort of how-to steps that I'm going to recommend here. Okay, so if the goal is to create a mentoring network, and then we sort of accept some of these premises of a mentoring network, how do we make it happen? Right. So number one, I would say examine what you are getting already and build on that. And I want to take a minute to sort of walk you through some things you can think about and just take notes for yourself about what might already be around you that you're maybe not thinking of as a potential source of mentors. So number one, is there a senior leader who checks in on you or takes you to coffee, whether it's virtually, whatever, regularly? Okay, so for example, for the first time, and Tiffany and Hakeem know this, I'm part of a writing accountability group. I've never done that before. Well, I don't think of that as all mentors for me, but it is worth sort of a check to say, okay, is there any faculty member in that group who is senior to me in the area in which I want mentoring, whom I might tap, right? So that is already a connection that I have that I could tap into. So think about the informal places where you've gathered, even a meeting like this, some place where you've been introduced to somebody, it becomes clear they have some expertise or experience in an area where you want mentoring, you might consider approaching that person. That's truly informal mentoring. And I remember at one point I had a conversation with someone several years into their time at Georgia State where they had bemoaned that they had never had a mentor. And I felt hurt because I actually felt like I had mentored that person because I took them to coffee regularly. It was very intentional on my part. Now, to be fair, we had never used the word mentor. And so there are all sorts of problems with the model that I was using. I'm not claiming that I was right and they were wrong, but it was clear that they were looking for a much more structured situation. And what we were doing was more informal. And there is a whole spectrum that can be mentoring. It doesn't have to be just a regular, let's say, weekly dedicated meeting. But think about that as a place to start looking for mentors. Number two might be slightly more structured than that, where a senior faculty member or colleague builds in time to meet with you regularly, not just the occasional knock on the door, a cup of coffee, or, pinging you through Teams, but they intentionally are checking in with you to discuss research progress and instruction. Is there someone in your department? Is there someone in the college? We'll talk about how to expand that if that's not happening. A more structured but not completely structured approach to this is that the organization has a conscious practice of offering mentoring, either through one-on-one relationships or via targeted topical events, right? So for example, I would say this sort of describes where we are as a college. We don't require that anyone have a mentor. We offer one-on mentoring through the college. We do targeted topical events with the idea that we're trying to hit folks where they feel a need, but it's not something where you walk in the door and you get assigned a mentor. And then the final structure is the organization has a conscious practice of assigning faculty to mentors for a period of time, usually for the first 3 years or so in an assistant professor or a lecturer's career. This often happens at Georgia State in the department. And I see a huge range here. Some departments, you'll start as a faculty member. Almost from the first day, the department chair will tell you, here's your mentor. And that person basically agrees to be with you maybe through the first year, maybe through pre-tenure or your third year review in the lecturer or academic professional rank. But it tends to be focused really on that entry point, those first few years. I would guess we probably all have some of something here going on that we could tap into and then build on that. And the most typical way it happens when I talk to people one-on-one is we start to brainstorm, well, who are the people that you've rubbed shoulders with who you think maybe have something to offer you, where either you directly or I on your behalf could set up a conversation that could lead to sort of the next step of a structured relationship. And maybe you just want to start with that first cup of coffee with somebody before you ask for an on-term mentoring relationship, sort of jumping from 0 to 60. Maybe you want to sort of scaffold it to see if there's, a relationship that makes sense. The other thing is to have multiple relationships at multiple levels. If we think back to that networking map, I don't want structured mentoring going on for myself in all of those 4 or 5 areas that we looked at. I don't have time. I honestly don't think it would be productive. There are some places where I think I would benefit from a structured mentoring relationship. And those are the places where I feel like I need the most help and the most growth. So the best mentoring begins first with your own awareness of what you need, what kind of relationship you're looking for, and in what area, whether it's the teaching, the research, navigating the institution, that kind of thing. So once you've done that, then we go on to step 2, right? And that is thinking about why you want a mentor and sort of what you're looking for in a mentor. And you may have to flex a little bit, but it's helpful again to help you articulate, well, what am I hoping? Am I looking for somebody who's going to help me get short-term results? What I want in the next 3 to 5 years, I want to get tenure. I want to get promoted to full. I want to be a leader in my department. I want a leadership role in my professional organization. I want to be a journal editor or sit on an editorial board. Think about where you want to be. But then also the long-term results. And for me, this is much more vague, but I have certain sort of trajectories that I sort of feel like I've identified at this point that I'm on, and others that I've sort of stepped away from. This may take a while to figure out the long-term results, but having some sense as the years go by of what your long-term goals are is really helpful. Let me give you a classic division here. There are some people who know right from the get-go, I want to go into academic administration. I want to get tenure. I want to be promoted to full. I want to become a department chair and all the way on up. That's going to look different as a career trajectory, and I'm going to suggest different mentors for that than someone who says, I really don't want anything to do with any of that. Leave me alone. I want to do my writing. I want to do my research. I just want to do that. One thing I'll throw out there is that it is really difficult for your department chair to help you focus on long-term results for various reasons. They're probably helpful for you in the short-term results, particularly early on in your career, because your interest in getting tenure or getting promoted is very much in line with the department's interests. Those two things are bound up together. When you get outside of that to the more senior ranks and your long-term results, a lot of department chairs, for whatever reason, haven't been and aren't on the trajectory you might be interested in. And they may not see how it contributes to the department bottom line. So for example, I was working with somebody last year who really wants to become the editor of the premier journal in her field. That's her long-term goal. I think that's great. I think that's important for her. I think it will benefit her department. It is not something that her department chair is in a position to help make happen. So we had to think through what are the steps that we can take to help you accomplish that. Whereas the chair was incredibly helpful with the short-term results. All right, so it's going to depend a little bit on where you're headed. And these will change over time. Remember, of course, you're not locked in. The other thing you want to think about is, are there sort of unspoken requirements in your head that we should pay attention to? Is there a particular gender that you're looking for? Race, ethnicity, field of study, rank that you want to be connecting with in your mentor? Articulating some of that can be useful, but I would also say keep the door open for some surprises. You may find that there are people who can help you who didn't fall into the categories of people you thought would be helpful, but it's helpful to be able to name some of that. Just as important are access issues. Do you need somebody who is physically, geographically close? And in pandemic times, that's a little bit weird to think about, but is it somebody where you want to, when we're back in person, to be able to knock on their door? Or even now, is it someone that you feel like I could reach easily? They are accessible to me, whether it's via Teams, WebEx, a phone call, an email. They're able to be responsive to me. Do they have the time to give? Right? There may be some people who only have a little bit of time to offer you. Could that work? Or do you really need someone who can spend more time with you? It doesn't mean it can't work, but these are the things you'd want to think about in considering approaching them and thinking about how you would make sort of an ask or have an initial conversation. Right? Third, personal factors. What do you need in a successful professional relationship? And here I mean that you're not looking for a friend. One of the mistakes I see people make is they pick a mentor because it's somebody they like and they get along with. And ultimately what they've created is an echo chamber. And this friend will tell them what they think they want to hear and not necessarily say things you don't want to hear. So for example, recently I got offered an opportunity and I was really struggling with it. And so I called people in my mentoring network, just an informal phone call, and everyone to a person said, we think you're trying to talk yourself into wanting to do this, but you don't sound like you really want to do this. And then they got more pointed about why they thought I might even still be considering it. And they were willing to argue with me a little bit about it because they listened to my long-term goals over time and they were willing for me to push back a little bit. So don't pick somebody who's just going to tell you what they think you want to hear. So it may be somebody who's not necessarily as much of a friend, has got some professional distance that allows them to do that mentoring. Right? And again, just to reiterate, this isn't a sponsor and this isn't a professional coach. You can hire people to be professional coaches at certain stages in your career as well. And we can talk about that. Okay, so you know sort of what you're getting already. You know why you want a mentor. So how do you do it? Couple of strategies you can use, and Tiffany sort of started getting us onto this. Number 3, what networks do you have now? Who do you know who might be willing to mentor you? And you can look at this in terms of layers. First place, obviously, your chair and colleagues in your department. Number 2 would be the college. Are there committees that you sit on or have served on in the past? Are there events you have attended? Hakeem mentioned the research cafes. I would argue that there are a number of events that are going to occur this week as part of Research Reboot Week, where you might get introduced to people. This is one of the reasons to consider saying yes to college leadership. And this is where I'm going to get kind of cold-hearted. I don't believe in doing anything that only accomplishes one thing for me. Life's too short. So when I agree to serve on a committee, it has to do multiple things. Now, one of those things may be my department needs me to sit on a committee. Fine, whatever. But then I'm going to work pretty hard to get on a committee that gives me something else in return. It exposes me to people I haven't been exposed to. It gets me in front of people who I think are leaders in the college or the university who might then recognize me and think of me for other purposes. It's a committee that I think actually has some impact as opposed to one where I feel like it's sort of pushing paper. Now, you don't always have control on that, but then I tend to also be very cold-hearted about how much time and effort I put into it. So if it's a committee I have to do because I have to do, that's fine, but I'm not going to put tons of time in it. But one of the main reasons I agree to sit on a committee is because of the people that I will meet. So I have sat on at least 2, possibly 3 dean's search committees, huge amount of time. But as a result, I got to know some key folks in the college, and boy, I sure got to know the incoming dean. And it meant when that dean came in, I and my department already had a little bit of a leg up on building that relationship with the incoming person. It also gave me a chance to meet some of the other people who are decision makers. And I would approach them afterwards. I usually picked somebody out of that committee, and just asked to have coffee later to talk about the committee, to talk about my own work, things like that. People are genuinely happy to be invited to do something like that. Similarly, at the university level, at a certain point, if you're not already, you will serve on university committees. Think about committees you sit on or have served on in the past. And both these college and university things don't just apply here. If you come from another institution, either where you worked at another institution or you got your PhD at another institution, you may still have connections that you can draw on. All right, so are there people either where you taught previously or where you got your PhD, where there were committees you sat on, where that connection can happen? Thirdly, professional organizations. Right? Again, committees you can sit on, people you've met at conferences, colleagues at other campuses, similarly journals. Have you ever been asked to sit on a proposal review board of any kind? think about, are those going to be places where you get to meet people that you could imagine being a mentor for you later on down the road? Okay, so all of that is direct. And of course, that takes time. You got to know some people. Tiffany just got here. So there's a lot of these that maybe she doesn't have at Georgia State. Right? So the next strategy is one step removed. Who could introduce you to someone? So think back on all of those levels that we just talked about a second ago. And even if there's no one in your department who could be your mentor, is there someone in your department who knows someone who could be your mentor? Most of us know other people in our field, and we're happy to make introductions as appropriate. We do it for our students all the time. Similarly, we can do it for each other. So at Georgia State College University, are there senior faculty who know other faculty at Georgia State, or even at some of the other institutions around town, where we can make an introduction? Similarly, through professional organizations, and same thing, journals you belong to, professional organization, if you sat on a review panel, things like that. If you decide, yeah, I think I want to do this, Catherine can't mentor me, but Catherine may know so-and-so, and it sounds like she'd be willing to make an introduction for me, how do you go about making that happen? There are a couple of strategies that you can take. One is to come and say, I want an introduction to so-and-so by name. I know this person. I think they'd be able to help me in my field. For whatever reason, I don't feel comfortable just sending an email myself. Would you be willing to make an introduction for me? It would be helpful in that case to explain specifically what you want from the connection, so that when you reach out, I can explain why I'm making the introduction. Right. So, and I'm going to make something up just because I can right now. All right. So Tiffany, you mentioned teaching earlier. I'm just going to build on that. Right. Let's say Tiffany wants to build her teaching, doesn't know who to contact to improve her teaching. And I say, oh, you know what? For years, I met with Peter Lindsay. He's an award-winning professor in the Department of Political Science. He's won awards in the department, the college, the university, the country. He's a fabulous teacher. I'm sure he'd be willing to meet with you and work with you on your teaching. Tell me a little bit more about what you're hoping to get out of that, right? So we would do it that way. So this is where you ask for someone by name and you tell me what you want from that connection. The other way it goes is when you don't know the person, but you know what you're looking for, right? So again, Tiffany comes and she says, I don't know anybody at Georgia State apart from the people in my department. COVID's made it worse. I really want to work on my teaching. Who would you recommend? Well, then I'll start going through a few people that I can think of. I may ask some questions and I might come up with the name, again, dependent on specifically what you want to learn. The key thing here is for you to be specific about what you're looking for. If you come to me and say, I just want a mentor, and you can't tell me much beyond that, it gets really helpful to make the connection. It's much easier for me if I'm hearing, oh, this is what she's looking for. And again, most faculty and most of us, sitting up in the dean's office want to be helpful. It makes us feel good. So, anything we can do to at least give ourselves the illusion that we're being helpful, we will usually do. And the more specific you can be in the request, usually we will do this. One thing you want to keep in mind is that senior faculty and everybody uses up a little bit of professional capital when they make introductions. So you want to make sure, if I'm going to introduce you to, let's say, Peter Lindsay, or, Hakyun wants to get introduced to the head of the Georgia Humanities Council, that you follow up on it, that you're professional, of course, in how you take advantage of that relationship, those kinds of things. Because we burn a little bit of professional capital if that then fizzles out. But the flip side happens as well. If I make introductions and then people come back and say, oh my gosh, I had coffee with Tiffany Player, she's amazing, I'm so glad you introduced her to me, then I get to build a little professional capital too, right? So this is a good strategic thing for us to do as well. So strategies 3 and strategy 4 are to really start with the network that you have, sort of in concentric circles, initially by identifying who you already know and thinking about how to approach them, but then also thinking, who do you already know and what's their network? And that immediately sort of expands the network that you have available to you. Right. Number 5, how to get a mentor. I would ask those whose jobs focus on mentoring, right? If you need one and you just feel like I really need help identifying a mentor, there are people in place who are charged with doing this and have resources. Number 1, your department chair should be in a position to help you. Right? But I would also consider chairs of other departments. If you've built relationships, or some people just have a reputation for doing this well. I've actually put a couple of people on some of the other events for this Research Reboot Week, and it's because they're effective at doing that. So you can look at other department chairs as well. Anybody on my faculty affairs team can help you do that. I'm happy to do that, but so is Mindy Stombler, so is Dan Cox, certainly Dan Diacampo, anybody else in the college would be good. But also consider other colleges. If your research goes beyond what we do in the College of Arts and Sciences, consider other colleges. And that's another reason to sit on a university level committee. Another person you can go to is we have an associate provost for faculty affairs, Dr. Nicole Parsons Pollard. She just started this past summer, and her job is to help facilitate faculty growth, and that includes mentoring. She cares very deeply about mentoring. And I've known some faculty who just didn't feel comfortable talking to their department chair for whatever reason, coming to folks in the college for whatever reason, and went straight to Nicole. She's great. She'll meet with you. She will talk with you. She may, if it's appropriate, circle back to me or to your department chair or to somebody else to help make an introduction. But if you ask her not to do that, she won't. And it's a way to help you expand the horizon. The other person I would mention, and I didn't list her here, but I should have, is Kavita Pundit, who is our former Associate Provost for Faculty Affairs. She's now a faculty member in Geosciences, but she was Associate Provost for a number of years. She knows a lot of people across the university. She herself does mentoring. In particular, she's interested in mentoring folks who are more senior in their career, but she can help in other ways as well. So that's another person that you can talk to. Professional organizations. Most of your professional organizations have some committee that is focused on mentoring. Either it's a committee of other faculty members, sometimes it's a point person in the organization's office staff. Sometimes there are mentoring groups within the committee that meet during your annual conference, whenever that is. Don't be afraid to contact the executive director of your professional organization to ask about this. And again, most people I know are a little nervous about going straight to the top, but if you don't know where to go, your ED can tell you, and they're happy to direct you in the right place. The other place to go is that some professional organizations have a regional version of themselves. So if your national organization isn't particularly strong in this, sometimes there's a regional organization that will be stronger, and usually will have people who are more geographically close. So I've found sometimes that's a better place to start. And they know people who are either at Georgia State in another college, or they know people who are at other universities locally that we don't know, and they're really happy to help. Another resource is in our college, we have an equity and engagement and mentoring working group, and their task, their charge from the college's strategic plan is to offer mentoring to individual faculty. This is the website address, and if you go to the website, there is a tile you can click on to request a mentor, and that'll just get the ball rolling. And then one other resource that people sometimes know about is the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. And they're at, I think, facultydiversity.org. I'll put that in before I send the slides. We are a member institution of this group, and some of you are already familiar with them. They run workshops and things like that. But occasionally they'll also do something that involves a mentoring relationship as well. So depending on what you're looking for, all of these people can help you sort of work through the questions that we've looked at before and think through what would be the best way to identify a mentor for you. And then finally, think about the elements of successful mentoring that you bring to the table. Be specific about what you're looking for. This may include your short and your long-term goals, but it also may be just simply identifying obstacles you think you're facing. I know sometimes when I talk to people about mentoring, what always strikes me is that the first thing they talk about is often a challenge that they're facing. So it's not the goal so much as I can't seem to do X, whatever X is. Being able to name that is really helpful, because remembering that, then your mentor will focus on you. What I mean by that last statement, remember that your mentor will focus on you, is that often the mentor is not going to be in a position to get rid of that obstacle if it's institutional. They'll be focusing on you. But part of my job is to try to remove the structural obstacles. So if you feel like you're facing a structural obstacle, please let me know as well. And simultaneously, we will work on those. Number two, be prepared to change yourself. I've worked with some people who wanted mentoring and became pretty clear. They just wanted to do what they were doing and somehow have a different result. And that wasn't going to happen. And so part of the mentoring relationship had to be their willingness to do a little bit of change themselves. Number three, set a specific timeline, and I would say a short timeline, at least in the beginning, because that gives both you and your mentor an out if the relationship isn't working. So for example, if we're able to identify mentors for all of you, let's say in the next few weeks, probably I would set up a goal of accomplishing something by the end of this semester, and then see what you're thinking at the end of the semester. A lot of things are going to change, I hope, at that point anyway, but don't ask for something indefinite. Set a specific timeline. And then a mentorship relationship can be continually evolving. If you're happy with the current mentor, anticipate losing her. Life happens, but you can also anticipate the relationship shifting a little bit. As you grow more senior yourself, you may find that the relationship shifts. So let me shift now just to Q&A and see, covered a lot of information in there. And I'm curious which strategies you'd want to hear more about, or which ones you've got questions or concerns about that we could tease out a little bit more.
Well, I guess my first kind of concern would be the step 4 about introductions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I understand, or I guess what would be your suggestions in terms of trying to just kind of think about what your long-term and short-term goals are so that you can be in a really good position to articulate clearly, like, yes, I'd like you to introduce me to this person, or maybe these couple of people who might have expertise in something that I'm interested in doing. I guess my kind of concern just kind of with starting out is how can you kind of balance the short and the long term so that you can get in touch with the right people who can help you, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And I don't want to make it sound like it's easy. I think part of it is a process of self-discovery. I think depending on, what's important to you, it may be that the short-term goals are the priority. You've got a book project you want to get done, you're not getting the work done. You feel like, I know I can do X. My goal is tenure. I really need some mentoring to know, am I on track for tenure? I've got to take a look at the P&T guidelines for my department or the promotion guidelines for my department and really make sure that I understand what they are, because I'm worried I'm putting my effort this direction and I'm going to find out too late it's the other direction. If that's your concern, I would state that as your concern. I think it's helpful to recognize that those are relatively short-term goals. They may be your goals for right now, in which case don't feel like you need to make the other ones up. But I think having a sense that those are short term is good. The flip side is I tended to be more long term in problematic ways when I started because it was hard then for me to say no to things because I kept thinking, well, but this will help get me to, you know, associate deanship, whatever. Well, everything I was going to do at that stage was going to help me get to associate deanship, but it wasn't all going to get me to tenure. And so I really needed to focus on that. And some of the best advice I got from a couple of mentors I had early on, I was involved in leadership with this very small, like, center at the time. And I said, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to be helpful? And the two people independently said to me, the most helpful thing you can do is get tenure. Stop doing anything else. And it wasn't what I wanted to hear, but they were absolutely right. And so in some ways, it was also for me aligning the priority of the short-term and the long-term goals. So I wouldn't say you need to have this all figured out. Just start thinking along those lines of short-term and long-term. I don't know if that helps.
It does. Thanks.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I think it was more feasible before pandemic. You meet people at the conference, and then you introduce, you introduce other people through your friends or other colleague or your PhD advisor. But I think that was that was kind of a very common way that I got to know people and then get, work together. So, would you give us some suggestions or advice during this, how can I say, on contact
Yeah.
time? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes back to figuring out, and you can all sort of brainstorm for yourselves. If I ask the question, who do you want as a mentor? If you could have anyone right now, what comes to your brain? Is it a name or is it, I don't know who it would be, but I really need somebody to do X? So you start there. Then you sort of figure, okay, that's sort of point X over here. So just take a minute and think through that. If you could have anybody be your mentor right now, who would it be? And now start asking yourself, is it a person or is it a kind of person? And then start thinking, okay, well, where are they? Are they close? Are they far? Are they in my profession, my organization? Are they here in the college? And then if it's somebody you do know, we can talk together about ways to do that direct approach. There are ways to do that. Or if it's somebody you don't know, or you just don't want to make a cold call, how can we identify somebody who can make an introduction for you? And that's not as big a lift as some people might ask. And then what I would do in COVID times, honestly, is this is just me, I tend to like the phone for a casual conversation better than I like this format. Because I would be worried about somebody I don't know, like looking at me and looking at my office setup behind me, and like my lighting's really bad and like all of that. And I don't worry about that on the phone. But do whatever medium is most comfortable for you. And then we just shoot them an email and say, I would really love the opportunity, or you have me or whoever shoot an email saying, I'd really like you to have, 15-minute conversation with so and so about X. And the key thing is give them an about. Like, it isn't just, I'd really like to talk to you. That doesn't help. I'd really like to talk to you about X. Do you have 15 minutes sometime in the first couple weeks in February where I could pick your brain? And then hopefully they write back and they say, yeah, sounds terrific. Or they write back and they say, February is really bad for me. Could we do March? But then it gives them something to react to that isn't just really, really vague. And then it can start building from there.
Thank you.
Sure. Andrea, Michael, and Casey. I don't know who Casey is. Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Quick question. You mentioned professional coaches earlier, and can you just talk a little bit about like what specifically does one get from a professional coach that we can't expect from a mentor and vice versa?
Yeah, the key difference is that a mentor is going to be a colleague who's going to give you advice based on their experience. So you would go talk with another senior faculty member, let's say in English, and they're going to give you advice just based on sort of what they already know, who they know, that kind of thing. A professional coach is trained, in some cases certified, to help you think through. Oh, hey, Kwang Tai, good to see you. To help you think through your career growth. So they've had training to help you think through how you build a research trajectory. They're often focused on people who are looking to move into administrative leadership. And so they'll work with you on those kinds of things. They cost money. Yeah, of course, yeah. But the key thing is they're not just giving you advice based on their own personal experience. They've actually been trained. They know the resources that are out there in a way that just a mentor doesn't have.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I have a question about the sponsorship that you mentioned earlier. How can you elaborate a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and honestly, this is sometimes known as the old boys network, because it is the not directed at you in the sense of somebody being available to talk with you about your own personal and professional growth. A sponsor is really trying to address needs of an organization or an institution, and they have to nominate people. So, for example, I sit on the nominating committee for my own professional organization. And every year we have people elected to offices, but you have to put together a slate of nominees for those offices. And I work with a bunch of other people to decide who is going to be among those nominees. Right. At that moment, I'm thinking about the people who would serve in those positions and serve the organization well. I may also nominate people for honors and awards and those kinds of things. That's going to be not really focused on mentoring and the career growth of the people that I'm considering, but the work that's done. Having said that, one of the big challenges is if you're not known, you then don't get nominated for those kinds of positions. The sponsor is somebody who will do that. And I've had people come to me and say, would you consider nominating me for this position? And it was honestly really helpful that they did, because for some reason they hadn't crossed my mind. And so being either proactive yourself, or if that's something you're uncomfortable doing yourself, asking somebody else to nominate you is perfectly acceptable. And I would argue one of the biggest weaknesses of our university and our college is we have really stellar faculty, and we do not have our share of national awards and honors. For some reason, we don't play in that game very well. And it is like pulling teeth to get department chairs to nominate faculty, or for faculty to nominate themselves for awards for whatever reason. But it's a good thing for everybody involved for that to happen. Yeah. But so a sponsor is really responsible for nominating someone for a position or an award. And I would also argue that's one of the reasons to serve on some committees once in a while. And again, don't overdo it. We all have a tendency to, in fact, of the people in this room, we all have a tendency to overdo that. You want to think carefully about what you say yes to and what you say no to, so that you get in front of the people who can then nominate you for other positions. And sometimes that means saying no to one opportunity so you can say yes to another one. So probably, I know you guys have to go. What I will do is leave you with one question and then an invitation. I'm going to send you all these slides. I would say take one question with you, which would be, what is the next best step that I could take to getting a mentor? And then I'll invite you to contact me and I'll follow up with you on that step. And even if your answer to that question is, I don't know, that's worth knowing too. I'm happy to talk with you through it as well. We've got lots of resources and a lot of faculty who are available to help if you want that. Please don't be shy about asking, and I'm happy to help you sort of take the next step on this.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
So
thank you
helpful.
guys for making
Thank you,
time.
Ken.
Sure,
Thank
I'll send you
you.
guys the slides soon, and I hope to talk to you all soon.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye bye.